I'd like to start by thanking John Piera and his staff at Mimico Cruising Club for allowing us to have this great waterfront venue. I can't think of a more appropriate place to talk about this topic than out looking at the beautiful waterfront. So thank you, John. I'd also like to acknowledge that this town hall is being organized and funded solely by our, what I call our community residents associations across the Lakeshore, South Etobicoke. So this is just something that as community organizers, we're very passionate about, and that we really want to make sure that everyone has a voice in what we're doing tonight. And just to say, you know, Michael from Mimico Residents Association, Joanne from New Ontario Lakeshore, and Jenny from Long Branch, you know, these people have all been very helpful at getting us together tonight. So thank you again to them. And before we jump into the agenda, I just want to ask Laura to help say for a couple seconds on acknowledge the original caretakers of this great land that we call home today. Thank you, Laura.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Laura. I'm a resident in Mimico and grateful for all the community folks coming out tonight to have this conversation. So I just would like to start us off in a good way by inviting folks to just take a moment to reflect on or feel into your connection to this land, to your neighborhood, to the waters here, to the Toronto Island, which is all what we're here to talk about tonight and what we can do together to protect it. And of course, here in Etobicoke, we're on Indigenous land, and the Anishinaabemowin name for this area is Adobegoke, which means place of the alders. Specifically, we're in Mimico, a name derived from the Anishinaabemowin word Omimika, which translates to abundant with wild pigeons. Yeah, and this might be new information for people. So this name refers to the massive flocks of passenger pigeons that historically used the nearby Mimico Creek mouth as a migratory stopover before the species went extinct, actually. The name of this is traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. We're grateful. We gratefully acknowledge these caretakers of the land who've protected it for generations and generations. And it's an important reminder and affirmation of our role and our accountability to Indigenous nations and to all Indigenous folks here on Turtle Island. This land's also part of Dish with One Spoon territory, which is a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabeg, and allied nations to peaceably care for and share this land, the waters, all the biodiversity around the Great Lakes region. And all of us who have come to live and work here are actually responsible for that treaty, for honoring the treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And so I hope that's what we're all here to do tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. If we can move to the next slide, please, which is I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we're trying to do tonight, which is basically, I'll start with what success is tonight, which is three things. One is that everyone leaves with a better understanding of the potential impacts of the Billy Bishop Airport expansion. Two, you know where your elected politicians stand on these issues, and we don't have to agree on everything. This is what we need to know where everybody is. And you're aware of what you can do going forward to try to protect South Etobicoke waterfront, and that is something that we'll have a quick discussion on. Okay, can you advance the slide? Okay, and anyway, I'll continue while they're working on the technical side. Speaker lineup, we got some great people here tonight. First, David Powell, like many retired people, he's now busier than ever, heading up a number of initiatives, and one including a not-for-profit group that's really trying to analyze the impact of Billy Bishop from a fact base. And he's got some really interesting stats, and he's a big picture guy, so we give him the big picture overview work. Tim Gray is Executive Director of Environmental Defense, which is a leading environmental advocacy group. He's going to share some great insights, really focused on the potential environmental and ecological impacts of the airport expansion. Amber is here as well. They're all here in she needs no introduction. She's been a very strong voice at the City Council. And she's also been, come out and seen the videos, things like that, put some clear opinions about the expansion into the Billy Bishop Airport. And if you haven't listened to her video, I encourage you to do so. Lee Fairclough. She is our Liberal MPP for our area who recently released a statement around the airport expansion. She's also appearing via video tonight because she's actively and working remotely, working on becoming the next Ontario Liberal Party leader. So that's her objective. So we wish her well. So lastly, Mr. James Maloney is also here with us for Etobicoke Lakeshore. We're thrilled. We had some scheduling confusion, but it's been resolved in our favor, and he's here today. He's been a great partner. He's served our riding for over a decade, and we look forward particularly to James sharing his perspective as the federal government has a strong voice on the approval of the airport expansion plan. And that we don't all have to agree, we don't have the same opinion, but we all want to make sure that we all hear everyone's voices. So we have a Q&A session at the end. Obviously, we have a packed agenda. We had to squeeze some more people in. So we're going to ask folks to hold your questions till the Q&A. We've got a couple questions that have been queued up through people submitting them in advance, and we'll try to get some live questions from everybody as well. So, and we mentioned earlier, we will have some next steps because this is just the beginning of an airport, expansion journey that we're on right now, and we'll be asking you to all of you to stay active in that, and we have some suggested next steps. So, with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to turn it over first to David. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you very much for your invitation to speak today. I'm with a new group here in Toronto called TO Reality Check. It's a group of Torontonians who are really very concerned about the future of our city. Our focus is the future of the Inner Harbour, and the Inner Harbour is described as being in the east you have the Portlands, in the west you have Ontario Place, then you have the Ontario Islands. So it's the whole 19th century Bay of Toronto, as it used to be called. The Toronto Board of Trade tells us that today the central waterfront, the Inner Harbour, attracts 18 million people a year. It's the fourth most visited neighborhood in Toronto after the downtown, Yonge and Dundas, and the financial district. It supports more than 100,000 jobs, and it contributes, according to the Board of Trade, $13 billion a year to our economy. Currently has 85,000 residents, and that's to be expanded by the construction of 75,000 new homes, reaching over 200,000 people by the late 2030s. It also is the home to, or frequented by up to 20 sailing clubs and water sport clubs. So why are we here? Our concern is actually very simple. There's no plan, no design, no public budget, no business plan, only a stated objective, 10 million passengers and a $5 billion price tag. That leaves many, many unanswered questions. This is not a new idea. The proposal to bring jets to Billy Bishop has come up several times before over the years. Each time it was studied by the federal government, and each time it was rejected. So the obvious first question is, what's changed? Rather than speculate, we gathered together as many unanswered questions as we could find from past studies and discussion of this issue. We published them on our website, torealitycheck.ca. We delivered them to the Prime Minister at the beginning of June, and our petition was supported by 28 prominent Torontonians, including 17 members of the Order of Canada and Order of Ontario, 3 former chairs of Waterfront Toronto, and a former CEO of Waterfront Toronto. There are many, many questions. I'll raise a few of them. Tim Gray from Environmental Defence will follow and look at the environmental and ecological issues. What questions will I touch on? What's this debate really about? Do we need an enlarged airport? How big would an enlarged airport be? How will people get to the enlarged airport? I just came by cab and it took an hour to get from South Rosedale to Billy Bishop. How will an enlarged airport impact city building? And what's the business case? So what's this debate really all about? It's not about whether Toronto should have an airport on the island. We have one. It's there. The question is much bigger. It is whether Toronto should fundamentally and irreversibly reshape one of North America's finest urban waterfronts without first showing the public a complete evidence-based plan. So what's the fundamental question? Today, the airport exists successfully with parks, housing, recreation, tourism, boating, entertainment, and the islands. The issue is one of scale. At what point does airport enlargement stop coexisting with these public uses and begin overwhelming them? So do we need an enlarged airport? That's a pretty basic question. Do we actually need the airport enlargement? The federal government has concluded that Southern Ontario already has sufficient airport capacity. One of our 4 commercial airports, Pearson, Hamilton, Waterloo, and the island, possess sufficient capacity, long-term capacity, to meet projected demand. So there's no apparent urgent aviation capacity crisis requiring enlargement of the island airport. In the last few years, in fact, the government has closed down Downsview and Buttonville airports. The massive Pickering Airport project was abandoned last year. And Pearson is investing billions, to expand from the present 47 million passengers to over 65 million passengers by the 2030s. So what problem is the airport enlargement actually trying to solve? Now, how big would an enlarged airport be? Well, most people haven't appreciated the scale. We don't have too many clues. As I said earlier, we just have a 10 million passengers and $5 billion budget. But to understand what that means, we have to look at comparable airports like Edmonton, which is the 5th largest airport. If Billy Bishop did move to 10 million passengers, it would be the 5th largest airport in Canada. Edmonton is currently the 5th largest airport, and it serves 8.1 million passengers. It occupies 7,000 acres and a 750,000 square foot terminal and 13,000 parking spaces. Next, number 6 is Ottawa. Ottawa serves 4.8 million passengers. So if Billy Bishop only was expanded from 1.7 million today to 5 million in the future, Ottawa is a comparable. Ottawa is about 2.5 times what Billy Bishop is today. It occupies 4,400 acres and 4,000 parking spaces. So Billy Bishop today, as I said, it serves 1.7 million, occupies 210 acres, which is less than 5% of the size of Ottawa, and has a 150,000 square foot terminal, which is about 20% the size of Ottawa's terminal. So trying to put it in perspective as to try and say, well, how much can we fit on this space, both the mainland, which is very developed, and on the islands themselves, raise serious questions. The Toronto Islands only total 800 acres. Ottawa's airport is 4,400 acres. The Port Authority has discussed runway extensions westward into Lake Ontario, extending the single runway to approximately almost 2 kilometers. But if you add to that the compulsory lighting system that must be at either end of the runway in order to guide planes into the runway when they're using visual approaches, you're talking about 3.25 kilometer location, the Mimico Cruising Club, to the Costco on Queen Elizabeth Boulevard. How will people get to the airport? Well, according to the Board of Trade again, the waterfront is already one of Toronto's most congested transportation corridors. What will thousands more passengers arriving and leaving the airport add to congestion? Unlike virtually every other modern urban airport, Billy Bishop has no integrated rapid transit system. The nearest subway station will be opened in about 10 years, Metrolinx willing, at King West and Bathurst, which is a kilometer away from the airport. Multiplying shuttle buses will just add to the congestion and the gridlock. Where will people park? Will it still be convenient? One of the arguments put forward by the proponents is Billy Bishop is so convenient. And it is. It's convenient today. But will it still be convenient when you start talking about the passenger volumes that are anticipated? And could the enlargement actually destroy the very convenience people value today? How will it impact city building? Well, perhaps the biggest question isn't aviation, it's city building. Billions have been spent in the Inner Harbor by all levels of government and the private sector, turning a derelict area into one of North America's finest urban waterfronts. We believe that housing is a national priority. Thousands of homes are planned in the Inner Harbor area. Affordable housing is planned. The entire new neighborhoods are planned. Will airport expansion and enlargement cut back on those plans? Will yeah, cue the other aircraft, please. Will airport enlargement undermine those plans? We don't know. We are already paying the price of uncertainty, however. Proposals are stalled, building on the portlands on the east end of the Inner Harbor, because the city doesn't know the future rules that will be imposed because of an airport enlargement. Nobody knows. So housing delayed is housing denied. Incidentally, as part of the housing issue is the question of noise. We're told that the new jet aircraft, generations of jet aircraft, are quieter or as quiet as the Dash 8s. Well, that may be true. Right now, however, Dash 8s take off about every 20 to 25 minutes. With an expanded and enlarged jet airport, the risk is there will be jets taking off every 3 to 4 minutes, creating a just all day long continuous noise pattern. I'm sure we'll hear a lot from proponents about mitigation. Oh, identify a problem, we'll find a way to mitigate it. We'll find a way to alleviate the consequences. Well, have we seen one example already? On May the 6th, the Toronto Port Authority, which is the owner of the airport, wrote a letter to Toronto City Council recommending that to the city that all residential buildings constructed on or near the lake should be designed to keep the windows closed. And so you wonder what's going to happen to balconies and patios when you're in a residence overlooking the lake. The Toronto Port Authority also recommended to the city that the wording of any residential rental contracts or sales contracts for residential units expressly shield the airport from liability related to noise. So I suppose that's mitigation. So what's the business case? The short answer is there isn't one. Sure, there's some back of the envelope economic growth numbers that with no serious backup. But it's not enough to say, if we build it, they will come. Questions abound. What are the costs? How will it be financed? Who will pay? What are the benefits? Who benefits? Who bears the impact? Large public infrastructure decisions deserve more than optimistic projections. I think the government is asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, how do we enlarge Billy Bishop, government should first ask, do we actually need to? If the answer is yes, show us the evidence. The federal government has studied this idea repeatedly for decades. Show us the plan. It's accumulated all sorts of information over the years, and it has enough to produce a plan. Delay costs our city. Show us the plan, show us the costs, show us the trade-offs, show us the benefits. Let Torontonians debate the future of our city. We're asking the government to earn public confidence. Put the cards on the table, show Toronto the complete plan, let the evidence, not assumptions, guide us on one of the most important city-building decisions our generation will make. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's a great crowd. You could be out there on the dock. So when we get into the Q&A, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I went swimming all weekend, and my ears are full of that out there in the harbor, so I can't hear anything. My name is Tim Gray. I'm Executive Director of Environmental Defense. You may have seen me, our staff, our board members, our volunteers. Some of you are our volunteers. You may have seen us online, on television. We work on climate issues, clean energy, land use. You may have seen us chasing the premier around the province, trying to protect the green belt. We won that one. That was nice. We are focused on the key issues that need to be addressed in Canada to protect our collective future, to ensure that our environment is center of decision making and not pushed to the side, and that when new projects come forward, that they're going to be done in a way that is in keeping with the long-term sustainability, health, and environmental protection of this country. And that's what we do every day. So tonight, I am going to do a little bit of follow-up on David's excellent presentation, trying to illustrate some of the things that he covered, and then dive into a little bit more detail in the brief time that we have, so we have more time for that conversation, into some of the ecological impacts that we see that are likely from a massive expansion of Toronto Island Airport. Next slide, please. We may be able to skip over the next one if we can get to it. Maybe not. All right, I will dive into it without slides. Where would I start? What I have here is, if we can get the slides going, is some illustrations of what David was talking about in terms of runway impacts. Some illustrations that we've done and had drawings done that will actually show the scale and scope of it in kind of three-dimensional space, so you can get a sense of what the proximity of the runways would be, both to downtown Toronto, but also to the western areas here. Okay, let's just go to the next one, please, if we can. All right, so western end of the Toronto Harbor gives you locates us. These, all of these parks, etc., are on the takeoff area of the expanded runway. They're on the takeoff area now, but the increased impacts of jets would influence all of these natural areas along the Western Harbor and into Etobicoke. Next slide, please. Some of the uses that would be impacted and would interact with increased jet use along this western waterfront: rowing clubs, recreational land-based activities, including Sunnyside Pavilion, High Park, etc. All these places are going to be in the takeoff zone of increased jet use. Community and adjacent impacts, all of the places listed there. Next, please. You get a better sense here of that waterfront area with the jet takeoff area, which If you see, it's hard to see, I realize, from the back of the room, but you can see the Humber Bay and the takeoff zone coming from Toronto Island Airport with expanded use. This is from environmental impact study that was done around the first time when jets were talked about on Toronto Island Airport about 12 years ago. Next, please. Just some of the, looking back towards, look at this one here in the bottom left-hand side where the towers on the waterfront are here, closer to Humber Bay, Island Airport in the distance, Toronto Island. You can imagine the jets coming off the end of that with a much expanded runway right over the front of the harbor, right in front of here. Next, please. A little deeper dive into the Western Gap. So right now we have, the Western Gap is the way that boats get in from Lake Ontario into the inner harbor on the waterfront. So now it's fairly narrow, but it's short. That is going to change because we're going to have a runway that extends much, much further to the west if this expansion goes ahead. So these are some of the changes that are going to occur. We're going to have lake filling. We're going to have much larger marine exclusion zone around that expanded runway. We're going to have runway approach lighting. As was mentioned, once you move into jets, you have to have runway approach lighting like you would see at Pearson, if you're flying into LaGuardia, it's actually in the water in LaGuardia as you approach. You have to have that airport lighting. You're also going to have blast deflectors for the jet exhaust to try and deflect some of that wind that otherwise is going to actually knock over the boats that are going by the runway. We're also going to have a much wider runway to allow the taxiway to go out to the end. So next slide, please. I want to show you just what that looks like. So there, oops, sorry. Right, no, one more. Right there, yeah. So that's the existing runway. Next, please. And then right now, you may have heard about this, a conversation about the existing expansion that's planned. This is for safety reasons because of Transport Canada changes in rules around how long the runway needs to be for the existing infrastructure. And that requires some small expansions. Next, please. So this is what is needed to be done for the existing expansion. It gives you a sense of the incremental gain. So the runway does get longer, but you don't really get the incursion westward in a very significant way. And the Western Gap accessibility doesn't change much. Next, please. Next. Some media coverage. Next, please. This is what you probably saw if you were following this in the media. The expression of what the runway would look like as a narrow finger going out into the lake. But the reality of airport planning is that it'll look significantly different in reality. Next, please.
Do we know for a fact that the orientation of the runway is going to be the same?
No, because we don't know anything for a fact because we haven't seen a proposal. But it could run north-south, maybe down Hanlon's Point. Who knows? But this is where the existing runway is, and any planned expansion of an existing runway would be here.
I'm just going to ask everyone to hold their questions again because we're tight on time. Thank you.
Next, please. So this is what it would actually look like in reality because you need a taxiway. So it's going to be much, much larger in terms of width, but it gives you a sense of what that airport approach lighting is going to look like, and also its proximity to Ontario Place. So this is significantly different looking now after the Premier was done with it. But this is the West Island and then the East Island and Trillium Park. And you can now see that the Western Gap becomes much longer and has a very significant choke point as you pass Ontario Place. Of course, as well, the Western Island is supposed to be the home of the Therm Mega Spa. So those enjoying their $150 a day Therm Mega Spa experience will get to look at the jets taking off 100 feet from their experience. So I'm sure they'll love that. Next slide, please. The Western Gap piece is important, and I'm going to explain a bit why that is. This just gives you a sense of how the approach occurs, runway lighting going out towards Etobicoke. Next, please. Again, you can see the proximity of Trillium Park if you've been down there on Ontario Place, that nice park that was completed on the east end of Ontario Place, which is still there. It's right off the shore. Next, please. So again, we can see the Western Gap, and let's get into some of the water quality issues. Next, please. I won't go over this again. David talked about this, just the massive increase in the number of people that are going to be there as a result of this huge increase from the existing 1.7 to 10 million passengers per year. Next, please. Jet blasts. These are the jet blast barriers I was talking about. The huge amount of thrust that's generated by jets in a space like this because of competing uses such as boats, etc. We'll have to have these jet blast barriers to partially deflect the blast. Otherwise, all of the boating activity that occurs around the island would be very risky for people. 150-kilometer-an-hour jet blast coming out of the back of the jets when they're taking off. So these would have to go up, obviously increasing the visual obstruction that is going to occur from the airport. Next, please. Next. Water quality. So right now, as is in the case of most cities that are trying to modernize their sewage infrastructure, is that we have a considerable amount of our sewage gets mixed in with storm water. And this occurs because the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers are old. And when we get big rain events, they overflow. City of Toronto's done everything they can with the money they have available to try and mitigate this by building these massive storage containers. You probably remember some of the constructions that's occurred along the waterfront as part of this overall waterfront revitalization program. Store all that mixed sewage and then process it at Ashbridges Bay when the storm event's over. But quite often, with what's going on with climate change, massive summer storms, they overflow anyway. And where do they go? They go into the harbor. Next, please. So this shows you all the locations here of both storm sewers, but the ones that are combined, where you have a risk of sanitary sewers and stormwater mixing and flowing into the inner harbor. So you can see a huge amount of it does flow out, both from the area that's being revitalized over on the former Portlands, but also the main part of the city all the way over to Ontario Place. And that all ends up into the harbor. So our existing flow pattern of water into the harbor is a clockwise circulation where you can see you have clean water coming in from the lake, goes into the Western Gap, and then it flushes out through the Eastern Gap. This is the current flush rate. So with whatever water quality problems we currently have in the harbor, they are mitigated to the degree that nature can do it by that flushing rate. You know, getting all that gunk out of the harbor, pumping it into the lake, where more natural decomposition occurs, microscopic and macroscopic organisms break it down, and it becomes clean again. So if you think back to that picture that I showed of that runway getting much, much longer, that's constraining that Western Gap, and what we're going to face is a change in water retention time. The ability of the water to move into the harbor and out will be changed. And because we haven't done the work yet, because we don't actually have a real proposal, and none of the hydrologists or biologists that need to be involved in this have opined on what it's going to do. We don't know what that's going to change, but we know that it is going to make the water retention time in the harbor longer. Next, please. Next, please. Let's talk a little bit about air pollution. You may have seen some of the recent coverage in the media about long-term studies that have been done in the area, the neighborhoods proximate to the existing airport, and the unduly high risks being put to people's health by ultrafine particulate matter that emanates from the airport. So this, and this just gives you a sense of, this is again from the study 12 years ago, the impact assessment done 12 years ago about that planned expansion. Gives you a sense of where the highest concentrations of some of these particulates are. But there was a great piece, I think it was in the Globe, maybe it was in the Star, about a month ago, just really looking at the impacts on people's health and the spikes that occur in emissions of this ultrafine particulate matter every time a plane takes off from Billy Bishop right now. Next, please. So as these concentrations of these particulates go up, you end up with increased risk of respiratory illness, cardiopulmonary and lung cancer, lesions in the upper airways, nasal lesions, respiratory tract tumors, etc. So all of these are expected to go up commensurate with the amount of ultrafine particulates that are emitted. And of course, we're talking about massive increase of the traffic, and therefore the amount of emissions is going to go up commensurate with that. That probably helps to explain the knowledge of that, even if the proposal isn't yet baked, why the Toronto Port Authority would be saying that future building along the waterfront should ensure that people can't have access to the outside, because clearly being able to be outside with all this pollution in the air is going to increase their risk of all of these things. So huge, huge public health problem, and one that really needs to be assessed very carefully with the increased emissions. Next, please. Birds and other wildlife, again from an older study, but just looking at concentric rings of bird hazard zone impact. As you can imagine, you have real problems with the potential for bird strikes. With jets, of course, you can suck them into the engines. You've probably seen that nice movie where that great pilot lands the plane on the Hudson, and after the birds get sucked into the engine at LaGuardia. That risk is real. We have done a lot to attract more birds to the waterfront. Beta Seagate Park, Oakland-Minising, the whole rehabilitation of the Lower Don. I don't know if everybody's been over there lately, but guess what? Waterfowl like it when you restore wetlands, spend billions of dollars on creating a new river. They tend to show up. And that and Tommy Thompson Park are kind of bird havens. So that risk is real, and active wildlife control, that is killing the birds, may be necessary if the expansion goes ahead. I'm almost done. Last one is just a little bit more on congestion, and just give it a bit of more of a regional context, because David talked extensively about just how much more crowded it's going to get. But if you think of this at a policy level as well, given what we're trying to do around intercity connectivity, especially at the federal government level right now, we have a whole conversation going on now about trying to get people out of planes and get them on a high-speed train to get Ottawa and Montreal and Quebec City. Lower emissions, more convenient, better in many, many ways, highly productive. And at the same time, we're going to have a federal project to massively expand an airport that is competing directly with high-speed rail. Not sure that makes a lot of sense from a transportation perspective. In addition, of course, we have just spent millions and millions of dollars finally building a frequent and reliable train service from downtown to get to Pearson. We've now just finally, people were laughing about Metrolinx, but finally the Eglinton LRT actually connects to that. And in the future, the Eglinton LRT is going to go all the way to Pearson itself. So we've done a lot of things thinking about how we want to do regional and interregional transportation. This proposal for Toronto Island Airport comes out of the blue, out of context, and contrary to airport studies that have been done in the past. So I'll conclude there. I have lots more to say about who you need to talk to and who's responsible for this project, but hopefully we'll get into that in the Q&A. Thanks so much.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Amber Morley. I'm really proud, if you don't know who I am, to serve as City Councillor for our community and be appointed Deputy Mayor representing Etobicoke. We did just have our last session of Community Council today, and it has been quite a whirlwind, but I'm really glad to be joining you tonight, and I'm really glad that our local residents associations have been able to come together to collaborate and to make this happen. I was at a tree planting a couple of weeks ago, and we had some conversations about what can we do about this. And unfortunately, by that time, the city had already been pushed out of the conversation. And so my advice and encouragement was to do exactly this, and I'm really thrilled. So congratulations to everybody, and thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. As was mentioned, I will keep my comments brief. I'm very excited to hear more from other speakers with us tonight, but I do want to be really clear about the position I've taken as a local councillor's office and my team as well. There is a video circulating that was mentioned as well of questions that we put to staff as part of some reporting that came through City Council. As a lifelong Lakeshore resident, as someone who's deeply committed to environmental stewardship and who understands my responsibilities in that regard, I am firmly and clearly against an expansion at Billy Bishop Airport. I was part of the conversations and sitting on council when the tripartite agreement and the need to address the recess safety considerations came forward, and we were very intentional to choose an option that limited the impact of the airport while continuing to support its functioning and its critical use and convenience to the downtown community, but also by mitigating future growth. We also know, and it's been mentioned, Pearson Airport is investing significantly into their infrastructure and preparing to take on another 20 million potential passengers there. It's well situated, well served by transit, highways, etc. I think we as residents who are very well served by Pearson really know and understand that. So I won't review a lot of the points. I think that were very well stated by the speakers that came before me. Just a quick couple of points. The city did, in fact, produce a report, Billy Bishop Airport Proposed Expansion, Response to Council's Request for Information on Housing and Transportation Impacts. So that is available online. You can take a peek at that. I'll leave a printed copy here with the organizers as well for their reference. And the reality is we don't know much about this. All of the assessments and analysis of the proposed impacts is being done based on the best information we can get our hands on and expert insight and advice. But because this came out of the blue and out of context, as we just heard about, there is no clarity. And while that is hugely problematic, to me, that's not the point. The point is we do not want this for our community, and we need to continue to stand strong. And be very clear with decision makers, of which unfortunately we at the city are no longer one, where we stand, what we expect, and a path forward to how we're going to get there. So thank you again for being here tonight. For anybody who is interested, there is a report back coming to Planning and Housing Committee on July 16th, next week, I think. And that is specific to a motion that, I'll just read it to you. So Planning and Housing Committee had deferred consideration of an item related to this, to Billy Bishop, to the July 16th Planning and Housing Committee meeting, requesting the city manager to provide a supplementary report on the following: the ownership structure and controlling interests of Newport Aviation, owner of the terminal of Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport, including involvement of JP Morgan and implications of foreign ownership and major transportation infrastructure. B, the City of Toronto's lobbying bylaw and provisions around disclosure and of details around parties that control or direct the activities of lobbyist activities, and impacts of the proposed airport and runway expansion on water quality in a harbor that we just heard a lot about. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. Call my office. We can direct you to it once it's available. And feel free to register to come to Pute at Planning and Housing Committee to share your feedback about those findings as well. Thanks again for being here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So now we're going to try to connect Lee, who is in a remote location, but now we're going to try to get her. Oh, look at that. We have her. Perfect. Welcome, Lee. We just had a bit of a music break. One sec.
Okay, is that working? All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Lee Fairclough. I'm the MPP for Etobicoke Lakeshore. It's great to be joining you tonight from Sault Ste. Marie. So I'm a little bit far from our riding at the moment. It's nice to see such interest in the discussion here tonight. I'm just looking right now at the size of the crowd. And certainly I will say I've been hearing from a lot of constituents on this issue. I do want to say a special thank you to David Malone and Michael Schwanzer and all the residents associations for organizing this tonight. I am sorry I'm not there in person. Some of you will know that I'm also running at the moment for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party, and I'm on an extensive tour of the Northeast that I planned some time ago. So I'm just very grateful to the organizers for letting me join you virtually, because I know that this really matters to people. I have had many people asked me what my perspective is on this issue. And I did release a public statement last week about it. It is posted on my social media and at leaffairclough.ca if you'd like to read it. But I'm actually going to just step through some of the highlights of what was included in that. It said that I have consulted with residents, businesses, and planning experts, and I believe that Ford's project for the Toronto Islands Airport is a bad idea, and it brings major risks and clear benefits for Toronto. It brings no clear benefits for Toronto or for Ontario. Now, the city's waterfront in Toronto Islands, I think we all know, are such an important and irreplaceable part of Toronto. The waterfront transformation that's been happening is a major civic achievement. Ford has said that he hopes to triple passenger traffic, and I think that that would destroy the islands and paralyze the waterfront. Now, I will say, this is what Ford's talking about. To my knowledge, there's no clear plan that we have seen other than what he is talking to. So when there was a piece of legislation that was tabled in the legislature in June, I do want everybody to know that I voted against that bill in June, primarily, honestly, because I don't trust the Premier and with this kind of a decision. And I do think that really I oppose Ford's Billy Bishop scheme because there's no coherent plan or business plan for this massive proposed expansion. And I think that, I mean, Ontario taxpayers really have no information about how much this will cost them. And the Premier does keep talking about jets and a 900-meter runway, while actually there's no actual public plan explaining exactly what's being proposed, the impacts to the waterfront, the city, or the economy. So I'm frustrated because I feel like we're debating headlines instead of facts, but this is what happens with this government very routinely. It's the same headline that happened of digging a tunnel in the 401. And what I have seen is that the absence of a plan is now only increasing the risk of negative impacts on residents downtown and along the flight path. The uncertainty we know that it's put a chill in the housing development in the area, which is vital to the waterfront revitalization plan. As I said, I just don't trust the Ford government to act in the interests of people of Toronto or Ontario. And, I think that Ford started talking about this massive expansion only when he was heavily lobbied for that to happen. I also, there is a hint that this is a way to actually support the bailout of an American banker for investment decisions. And as somebody, I think that people in Ontario are really tired of being ignored on issues that matter to them. And this is about priorities. Like if we choose to invest in something like this, it means that we're not investing in other things oftentimes. And I can tell you, it's been interesting. I have asked about this while I've been traveling the Northeast. Because part of the argument has been, this is an all-Ontario project. I will say, what do I hear very, very often? We're tired of having a Premier that wants to be the Mayor of Toronto. The safety on the highways in the north is one of the most significant issues that they care about. And from their perspective, transportation out of the north does matter. We know that there's unused capacity at the airport today. If they wanted to increase flights, they potentially could without a big expansion. But more importantly, how are we ensuring that people are able to travel safely in other parts of the province? And so I think people are looking for more attention from this government for issues across the province. Now, in terms of the waterfront, I have a different vision. The waterfront's real economic value will only be realized through a thoughtful plan that balances recreation, tourism, businesses, and housing alongside the Billy Bishop Airport. And we deserve a plan that will put people and communities first, not vanity projects. So I believe that Ontario deserves better, and you can definitely, there's many ways to get involved in this issue. Many of you showed up tonight, and you can continue to advocate in your communities. I would, if you've received a message from us, we've shared with who the relevant ministers are. and their contacts at the provincial level to be reaching out to, and I would encourage that you do that. Thanks very much.
Okay, and our final speaker tonight is James Maloney. And please, James, welcome.
Great, thank you, Dave. And look, thank you to, let me add my thanks to everybody who's helped put this thing together. Look, most of you in this room know me. For those of you that don't, like I've been the MP here for almost 11 years now, but I've lived here for over 50. I remember when there were 0 condos down here. I remember when these beautiful facilities that we're sitting in right now didn't exist. So nobody needs to sell me on the importance of preserving the waterfront in Etobicoke Lakeshore. And if you don't believe me, I'm really proud to have my colleague and next door neighbor here, Kareem Bardisi, who's the MP just to the east of us in Parkdale High Park, and ask him how much time I spend boring my colleagues talking about our beautiful waterfront. So I am here to tell you, if you take away only a few messages from me tonight, that I am here to listen. I want to hear what you have to say. And I want to do everything I can to preserve this waterfront, which includes dealing with any issues that may come up with Billy Bishop. And I emphasize the word may, because the challenge that I'm facing and Kareem is facing is that I want to deal with a fact scenario that can be presented to you and is presented to me, which I can then respond to and address. But that's not the situation we're dealing with. Because how many times tonight have we heard our previous speakers say there is no plan? There isn't a plan. There is no proposal. Tim, I think, used the word proponent. There's no proponent. I would encourage you to read that report that Amber referenced that was prepared by the City of Toronto, because it starts by saying they're preparing a report based on the information they have, which is media reports, and they conclude by saying, we can't come to a conclusion because we don't have any facts and there is no plan. But in the event that all of this happens and that happens and the other thing happens, this could be. I'm at a bit of a loss. I don't know how to respond to that. I want to have a town hall, and you have my commitment to this. This is another takeaway you can have tonight. And when I spoke to Humber Bay Shores about this originally, I said, let's have a big town hall with, a room with as many people as can fit in. And then we can talk about the facts and bring in people who can lay things out as they are. In fact, the people who called my office, one of the biggest complaints I've heard in the last few days is they couldn't get into this, which is unfortunate, because we really need to talk about this. I think there's people here from the Long Branch Neighborhood Association. Show of hands. Were you guys at the AGM a couple of weeks ago? I mean, we've had this discussion already. Yeah. Hey, Jenny, how are you? Nothing's changed since then. So here are the facts. 3 months ago, 4 months ago, you had Billy Bishop Airport, which was governed pursuant to this tripartite agreement, which we've heard so much about. There's 3 parties to that. The federal government, through the Minister of Transportation, Ports, the Port Authority, Ports Toronto now, and the City of Toronto. There was no plan for an expansion of Billy Bishop Airport at that point. There was no proposal to extend the runway at that point. The only thing that has changed between then and now is the province has passed legislation uploading the city's third of the governance portion of that agreement. But here's a third takeaway, and this might be the most important. Nothing can be done down there without all 3 parties agreeing to whatever that outcome is. And that includes Ports Toronto, now the province of Ontario, and the federal government. So keep that in mind, and you have my assurance that I'm going to be back here. We're going to have, if a proposal comes forward, I'm going to have consultations. I'm going to have public meetings. Kareem will do the same. We'll do them together because we need to protect this waterfront. We need to protect the waterfront to our east and to our west. That's the bottom line, isn't it? So I'm not here defending anybody or proposing anything, because the only thing there is to oppose, perhaps, and Lee said this, is the Premier's gone out and made some statements about, what I guess what he conceives, their conceptual ideas and his thought. I mean, those of you who are in the Mimico Residents Association, there's a point in there that says frequently asked questions, is there a plan? And it shows a link to show that there is. I encourage you to click on that link and go read what it says, because it is not a plan. It's something that Doug Ford and the province of Ontario put out there with some ideas. It was, in fact, that document predates the passage of Bill 110 in the province of Ontario. So I'm, like I think it was Tim said, on the one hand, he was asked a question. He said, you, sir, asked him about the direction of the runway. And he said, well, I can't answer that question because I don't have a plan. And then he showed a slide and he said, that's what the runway is going to look like. I don't know whether either one of those things is right, because there's no plan, there's no proposal. There's stories in the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail. I wish there was. And I will come back when there is, if there is a plan, because I don't know when it will ever materialize. And the other important thing you need to take away from tonight, I think, Dave, you mentioned at the beginning, he reviewed the history of previous discussions about expanding Billy Bishop Airport dating back to 2013. And these are all chronicled in that City of Toronto report. And what it says in there is in 2012 or 2013, there was a proposal, there was a proponent, they came back with a very specific proposal. It was to expand the runway by about 200 meters. The next thing that happened is there was a thorough, extensive consultation led by the federal government, and the plan was rejected. So any plan that comes forward will go through the same process. I assure you of that. We assure you of that. The last point I'm going to make is I want to talk about, I think it was Tim, you saw this RESA issue up there. That stands for Runway Extension Safety Area. Back in 2017, I was sitting in a room with the then Minister of Transportation, Marc Garneau, and he sat down with myself and some other Toronto area MPs and said, Billy Bishop Airport is one of a small number of airports in Canada that has some safety compliance issues at the end of the runway. As a result of that, there was 3 options put forward. There was RESA 1, which you heard Amber talk about, RESA 2, and RESA 3. None of those options proposed an extension of the runway. What they proposed was different options to build out the end of the runway in a very small way. Not even, I think it's probably smaller than the diagram we saw up in the picture, but so that there was a safer landing area in the event that something went wrong. So the federal government supported, the federal government supported RESA option 3. Ultimately, it went to the City of Toronto, went to the City Council. It was debated. There was 2 requests from the city, at the City of Toronto. One was to extend the lease agreement so that any runway safety alterations could be done, because you need a longer lease so you can borrow money to make the improvements. Option 1 was the least invasive, and it basically puts some gravel and various things, I'll get into the technical stuff if you want, at the end of the runway. Option 3, and this is the important one, option 3 would have been slightly longer, but right now, and very few people know this, and I've been down there and I've seen it, on the eastern end of that runway, there are 3,000 vehicle crossings a year, including school buses. Option 3, RESA 3, would have eliminated that. It would have built a little road around the eastern end of this small safety extension so that buses and utility vehicles wouldn't have to cross the runway. Imagine if I was standing here saying, okay, there's a proposal that we're going to run school buses across the runway. How would you react? Right. Because the City of Toronto voted for RESA option 1, that continues to be the case today. Perhaps if we had adopted RESA option 3, we wouldn't be standing here tonight having this discussion. So my message to you tonight is I will stand up for you, as I always have, as I always will tonight and any other day. I will show up at any event, any time to talk to you. You can call me, you can come see me. But I want to come back when we actually have some real facts to talk about. Because until that time, I agree with everything else Dave said about, the scenarios, about the environment. Of course I agree with that. Everybody agrees with that. But I don't know what that means. Because even Tim kept falling back to it, saying, well, I don't know what this means in terms of water quality. I don't know what this means in terms of bird preservation. By the way, it was the federal government who made those changes to the Dawn lands to create that area for which we now see those beautiful waterways with the increased bird traffic. So I'm here. I will always be here. But let's make sure that all of us have the facts, because unfortunately, because of what the provincial government has done, and some others have sort of jumped on board of this and gone out and created rumors and speculation and innuendo, which then turns into what people believe are facts and they're not. So reach out to me anytime, because I want what you want, and that's this. Thank you. Yeah, look, I invited Kareem to come here to support the issue, so I should give him an opportunity to say a few words.
Thanks, James. 50 years ago, I was not here. Sorry. But I moved here 25 years, just over 25 years ago, actually, and one of my first memories of moving here is the millennium, I guess 26 years ago, is the fireworks on the harbor front on at the turn of the millennium. And so, this is not my small town of New Brunswick anymore. Just a couple things, because I think some folks maybe have some questions from other perspectives or other locations. I know this is mostly a crowd that is living in Etobicoke Lakeshore, but James is our national caucus chair now. He was their Toronto caucus chair earlier. I'm a new MP, and so Toronto MPs, every Toronto MP is engaged on this issue to more or less extent. Some of us are having meetings like this. Some of them are happening online. We are working very hard collectively to, frankly, do the work that the province did not do on this, which was to make sure that Toronto's voices would be heard. There's a few kind of underlying things that we are doing collectively. One is to make sure that those voices are heard, to make sure that the public interest is paramount, and to make sure our expression on these issues is as collective as can be. So you'll see a lot of us put out kind of very similar statements like, oh, like what's that? What's that? A form letter. No, like that was us coming together and saying this is what matters to us. And James has articulated some of that. And I'll just share as someone who a lot of the legacies, a lot of the things that James point to are things that a lot of the things that have been raised are things that we have built together. And so I don't know why we would throw that away. And definitely that is, I think, the perspective of Toronto caucus members. And there's something in the Royal Commission report on the waterfront that David Crombie chaired called the Balance of Uses Principle, and that's something that's very important to us. I'll also just share that the Reality Check TO report has raised a lot of questions, and those were the same questions that were being raised by Toronto caucus members, which was really again prompted by not a plan. It was prompted by a Bill 110, but also it was a press release that had this 10 million number at the end of it. So the turning of that number, and when a bunch of us saw that press release and saw the 10 million, we were like, what? What is that? But a number in a press release does not a plan make. And so I think you have our commitment that we will keep the public interest in mind, that we will have the collective voice, both at the individual level, but at a Toronto level as well, and that we'll do the hard work with you. So thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, and particularly with James for helping us get clarity on where the feds stand, because I think that's something that we're somewhat missing, and it's just great to hear that, and we'll certainly take James up on it, and he did offer that earlier today as well, is to have another town hall, when we have some some harder facts to deal with. But in the meantime, there's still, as an example, a federal survey going on around what do you want for the waterfront? And there is a question there, do you support it or not, the Billy Bishop expansion? So, I think it's question 5. Please, if you haven't filled in that survey, please do, and share your views, because that's the way that the feds wanted to get feedback from residents. If you haven't done this, please do. And we can circulate to everyone who we have an email for, the links to that survey, or you can just Google it, you'll find it easily. There's also a great little take action that thanks to the Environmental Defense and No Jets TO that you can basically, double click on it and send a pre-formatted letter just by sharing your postal code and your name to the Federal Minister of Transport. And again, a copy, apologize, James, but it'll go to you as well. But, I think it's important to send the message that we care. And that's the way you do it, by taking action. And obviously, you can reach out to James as he's offered, but I would say let's wait until we see something else that comes. I know that we don't want to be bugging everybody for things that we're not still 100% clear on. And again, watch out for the Billy Bishop Airport town halls that I think will come. They may not be immediate, but as soon as we get harder facts, and I think everyone wants to re-engage and make sure that we're doing the best to protect our wonderful waterfront, which is how we started this meeting today. So we have time for Q&A. So Andrew is going to be up here with me. So there's no real rhyme or logic. We got a couple from the that have already been pre-submitted, but let's start. Maybe we'll go Jenny. Yeah, sorry. Oh, just hold on. We're going to see if we can get a mic to you, okay? Because we have this live streamed as well, so we want to make sure that everyone gets to hear you. And we may direct it to any one of you, so please stay tuned.
So I have so many. Act at all. So maybe there's a plan, but it's not accessible because of the regulations that were changed. If there is no expansion to Billy Bishop Airport to accommodate jets, is there a plan for development? That's my question.
Okay, and I'm not sure if we have, I don't think Lee's on the line anymore, because someone from the province should be answering that question. Can one of you guys want to take a crack at it?
Maybe, I can't speak to the provincial freedom of information legislation, which is what has significantly changed. I know when we as a Toronto caucus talk about this issue, we talk a lot about the housing plans for the East Don lands and actually all along the waterfront, and it's one of the principles that I have said and a bunch of us have said is going to be the lens through which we're going to look at anything. So definitely, and we have we've just announced investments in the East Bayfront LRT. We've announced investments in the Harbourfront Centre. We have the East Don lands development, which is going to bring a lot of housing. So there are lots of plans that are in place, and we can't. We need. Yeah.
Can you ask for information from the provincial government?
So the process, as I understand it, is that, and this is why we say there's the process that protects us the most, and all of us, is the tripartite agreement, which James mentioned, through which, so the process to do anything actually around the process to change noise levels, the process to change to allow different airplanes, the process to make any significant change is through the tripartite agreement, and it's riveting reading if you want to try, but that's the process, and so anyone who wants to propose any change has to come to the tripartite agreement table, and it's been amended a few times over the years, most recently to do the safety area.
Just quickly, so Jenny, your question is, can we as federal representatives make a request pursuant to the Access of Information Act to get the plan? Okay. You and I were at the Long Branch AGM not a month ago, and you talked about the plan. You referenced the plan. I said, get me the plan. I've asked the same of the people who organize this event, and I'm begging somebody, if there's a plan, get it. So I don't know how the Provincial Access to Information Act, you have the right to do that, just like everybody else in this room does. We don't have any special access to, well, here, we've got a provincial rep right here. But, I think we need to, and as for your second point, hold on a second, Lee. As for your second point, is there a plan for housing where Billy Bishop Airport is? Development. First I've ever heard of this. Jenny, you're the first one who's ever proposed that idea to me. I'm speechless.
I think Lee's going to speak on the FOI piece, MPP. I don't know if we can hear. Otherwise, from my understanding, just quickly on that, it is the legislative changes to FOI, Freedom of Information access, is only related to federal ministers, cabinet members, and elected officials retroactively. And for civil servants and others within various divisions and departments of the provincial government, my understanding is FIPA and FOI is still eligible type of thing. You can still do it, but please, Lee, if you want to jump in with any additional comments or clarification.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I think the first thing to say is, I think that the suggestion that somebody here could make that request to the government for that plan, you can do that. They will then assess whether, with the new laws that the government passed just before we rose, whether or not they will release any of the information, and it is retroactive. So I in fact, and I will check, was it Jenny that was speaking? Did I recognize her voice? Yeah. You know, I think that I believe one of my colleagues has already submitted the same request, but I will look at that as well. The issue is there's a lot of time for them to be able to respond to that. I take comfort in the comments I heard from James, though, which is at the end of the day, it's a tripartite agreement. But it would be very interesting to know if there is actually a real plan, because, you know, as was said, there was, you know, the number of 10 million passengers mentioned in the Ford release that I don't think has been a plan that has been supported by a tripartite agreement table at this point. So anyways, I would just say, like, I think we can put these requests in and ask for the information. And then secondly, you know, keep holding them to account to make sure that they are being part of that tripartite approach to whatever this development is.
Just quickly, just because this is a really important thing to know about this process, is that the provincial government doesn't have a secret plan because they can't be the proponent. They do not own the airport. So you can FOI if you wanted to. The FOI Act has been changed, but there is no plan coming from the Ontario government. There never will be. If a plan comes forward, it'll be coming forward from the Toronto Port Authority, which owns the airport. Who owns the Toronto Port Authority? The federal government. So if a plan comes forward, it will be from the federal government, not the provincial government. Premier wants to expand the airport, but he can no more come forward with a plan for developing Toronto Island Airport than any of you can come forward with a development proposal for your neighbor's house. You don't own it, you can't develop it. Only the federal government can do it. So keep that in mind. The real proponent is going to be the federal government through its control of the Toronto Port Authority.
Just so we have this clear, the federal government does not own the Port Authority. That is legally incorrect, Tim. It is an independent arm's length body. There are members on it appointed by the federal government. There are members on it appointed by other bodies as well. So let's keep that in mind. So to say that it is a federally owned or controlled body is factually incorrect.
Thank you. And that was question number one. This gentleman here. Can we get a mic? Okay, why don't you come up here, because I want everyone on the live stream.
I just want to start by saying how weird the Toronto airport is. No other world-class city does that. Nobody has that. You might say Chicago with Meeks Field does it, but they keep it way out in the lake. No other city does that. And the fact that the idea we're even going to consider expanding it at this time, it just goes against the total grain of what cities, world-class cities, want for their people and their places. And the second thing is, you can paint the wall up a hangar at the airport without getting the GTAA and the Transport Canada involved. We all know the federal government through Transport Canada would have to approve this. So what we have now is we have something. Yeah, the question is this: I want to know if you're going to talk to the transport minister and point out that this is another stupid idea, like the tunnel under the 401 or casinos in the Portlands by a meddling and secretive premier, and you're going to be left holding the federal government. You are going to be left holding the flaming bag after he goes down in the next election. Do you really want that? You really want that view right there? Because we know where it all points to, and it isn't going to be some sort of performative national development program that we're going to push forward. That's for things like critical minerals, national transport. Nobody's going to do that for the city here. So you need to, will you talk to the transport minister and making clear that this is going to be a flaming bag that you are going to be holding?
You'll be happy to know I spoke with him this morning. We didn't use that language, though. I talked to Steve McKinnon when we're in Ottawa every day. Steve has been very accessible and very supportive of hearing the views of Toronto area members of Parliament, including Kareem and I. Again, I mean, holding the bag, I mean, the tunnel under the 401, I remember somebody asked me in the media, Ottawa, do you support the tunnel under the 401? I said, what tunnel? I mean, this is, you know, something that the Premier said one day. This isn't really a lot different, except that the tunnel could be built by the province of Ontario. This can't be done by the province of Ontario.
Thank you very much, James. Maybe we'll go to the back as we've just spread it around a little bit. Yes, you on that, no, sorry, behind. And we're obviously over time, so this may be the last question unless we want to continue. So please, come up. And thank you to everyone for their patience. I know we went a little over time, but there's a lot of passion and good information being shared.
Hey, glad to see you. Hi, so I just wanted to, I took the survey, the federal government survey, and it really left a bad taste in my mouth. It wasn't really like a survey to find out information. It was more a survey. It was more a survey to get our approval of something or get our agreement for something. So what we just heard is the federal government is the one that owns the land, and the federal government is going to have to come up with a plan. So it sounds like that's what they were doing. It sounds like they were asking questions to get a response to say, oh, this is what the province wants.
You need to ask a question.
So why is the survey, who wrote the survey? Did the Premier write the survey? Who wrote the survey? And what was the expected result of the survey?
Okay, that's a question.
Look, I don't know who wrote the survey. I mean, we saw it when it just before it came out. I'm not going to stand here and defend the quality of the survey, but rest assured that's not it. That's not the end of, that's not the consultation. It was done to put something out there just to get some feedback. In terms of ownership of the lands though, in fact, if you read that City of Toronto report that we've talked about today, it lays out who owns what share. The federal government does not own all of those lands. It's owned jointly by the federal government, the Port Authority, and was the city. It's now the province that owns a portion of it.
May I, Dave?
Yes, I think there's one other question from the Mimico that in the Mimico Residents Association we have had to face a few times. And it is a question that I would like to ask to the chair of the Liberal Caucus in Ottawa. It's whether or not you agree with the basic idea of the takeover of the City of Toronto's role inside the Port Authority activities. This seems, for many of us, to be part of a tendency by the provincial government to eliminate exactly the kind of local participation that is represented by municipalities across the province. It's happened in a large number of different areas, and it seems to have gone on here. And to some extent, it appears that the idea of expanding the Billy Bishop Airport is almost like an excuse to have done one more step in making the Premier the Mayor of Toronto.
Well, I think that's a question better put to Lee, to be honest with you, because, look, the province, municipalities are legislative creatures of the province. So, and the federal government is not the court of appeal when the province makes a decision. So when the province decides to upload powers from the province or download powers to a city rather, the federal government does not have the constitutional jurisdiction to intervene and say, no, you can't do it or do it this way. So whether I think it's a good idea or not, here's the important message from my perspective, and Amber and I have talked about this before. This does not eliminate the voice of the City of Toronto, because the people in Toronto are the voice of the City of Toronto, and that's you. So the fact that the province now has the 1/3 interest in the governance structure does not mean the people in the City of Toronto and the people in Etobicoke Lakeshore don't have a voice. Because you still have an MP, and you still have an MPP, and you still have a councillor. So you haven't lost your voice. The governance structure's changed. You haven't lost your voice.
Thank you. I think that's a great spot to end it, which is we all have voices. I think we've all used them today. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody. If there are, burning questions, you see the residents associations that are represented here. You can send that to one of those associations. We'll try to work with our speakers and get answers where we can. And if not, then we will certainly commit to all of us, I think, from everyone who's been here, to make sure that we continue to engage South Etobicoke residents in fighting and protecting what we value most about this area, which is the waterfront. So with that, I think I'm going to close and say thank you very, very much for everyone's attention. Thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers, because this isn't always an easy thing to do, and we appreciate all of your help. Thank you. Oh, sorry, and one other thing. Go ahead.
Hi, folks. If you want a sign, just like this T-shirt, there's a pile out here with ways to hang them on your lawn. Big pile out here. Grab some.